Hi everyone, welcome to Mini Hack Solved. My name's Dave Norris, I'm a developer advocate at MuleSoft, and I am going to be solving the mini hack that we called building a lead generation integration, and we'll be using MuleSoft Composer and Google Sheets. Now, mini hacks is an area of Trailblazer DX and Dreamforce where attendees can come and challenge themselves with a high-level use case where we provide some guidance on how to solve the mini hack without providing the exact steps necessary. So you have to think a little bit about how you're going to approach the problem. Let me show you what I mean. Here was the challenge that we set the attendees at Trailblazer DX this year. You can see here that this is the structure that the requirements take. There is a high-level use case. In this case, we're setting the scene that we're a marketing team at a fictitious company called Acme, and we collect lead and marketing events in a Google Sheet. And the sales teams use Sales Cloud to manage their leads. So currently the process is after the event, the marketing team manually checks to see if the lead exists in the Sales Cloud org. If it doesn't, it goes and creates the lead if they don't find that match. So obviously that process is very time consuming and error prone. So our challenge for the mini hack is to find a new lead in the marketing lead spreadsheet and determine whether that lead already exists in Sales Cloud. If it is a new lead, then we will create a corresponding lead in Sales Cloud with the details in the Google Sheet automatically. Now, for this challenge, we are going to use MuleSoft Composer, a developer edition org, and Google Sheets. So, as I scroll down the requirements, you can see that we provide some high-level guidance on how we're going to approach this. So we are going to create a Google Sheet that mimics what the marketing team are going to use to capture the leads from the event. And it's going to ask for some columns. So basic contact information like first name, last name, and email. Then we're going to create a MuleSoft Composer flow that will trigger based on a new record being created in that spreadsheet. Then we will query our developer edition org to look for lead records where we'll match on name and email. Then, based on the fact that nothing's returned, so we don't find a match in our existing developer edition org, we'll create a new lead record automatically, and we'll set corresponding values on the lead record directly from the Google Sheet. So that's the basic requirements. Let's take these steps one by one and see how we can build that out. Okay, so step one. Based on the requirements, let's create a Google Sheet for the marketing team to capture prospects. And since it gives me the data points to capture in the form of columns, let's copy those just like I would if I was at the mini hack. Logging to the Google account I want to use for this challenge. And let me just recreate the data points to capture: first name, last name, email, phone, industry, country, and lead source. We'll give it a unique name so we can refer to it later on really easily. So let's call this marketing event leads. And I'm going to put my initials at the end. And I'll rename the worksheet itself to leads. So we now have a marketing event leads Google Sheet that I can now use to capture prospects. So this is going to be the initiation point for our flow. So let's move back to the requirements and look what we need to do next. Okay, so the next step in this mini hack is to use MuleSoft Composer. Now there are two versions of MuleSoft Composer. There is a standalone version, and there is a version that I can install into an existing Salesforce org through a managed package. Now that's what I'll be using for this mini hack, but note that the steps needed are identical in both. So once you've installed a managed package, you can access it via the app launcher. There'll be an app called MuleSoft Composer. Once you open it up, the homepage has great resources that links you off to things like Trailhead modules and videos to learn more. But for the mini hack, we're going to go ahead and create a new flow immediately. So the first thing I'll do is just rename this flow. We'll give it a name we can remember. Lead sync from Google. And we're ready to start. So I'm going to pause and just move back to the requirements. Just to make sure that as we build this out together, this is how I remind myself that I'm always thinking about what I need to be doing next. So it's asking me to start my flow based on a new record being created in the marketing lead spreadsheet from Google. So I can start my flow on a scheduled basis. That doesn't seem like it applies to me in this case, or I can schedule it based on something happening in a system. So when I open up the system event, I can now see the connectors that Composer has to existing systems, including Google Sheets. Now, I need to connect to an existing Google account. So I'll sign in with Google, connect to my Google account, grant the permissions it needs. In this case, we want to be able to read Google Sheets, and then choose the event that starts a flow. Now, it can be things like a new spreadsheet being created, or perhaps someone updating a row in the spreadsheet. But for us, specifically, it's when the marketing team create a new lead. Now, Composer is inspecting the metadata to show me all the spreadsheets I have access to. Now, we call ours marketing event leads with my initials. So that's the one I'll select. And then within that, if there are multiple worksheets, I can select the specific one that contains the leads. We only had one in this case. The only other thing I need to do is select the fields that are returned by default. Now, they're all returned by default. So you could individually deselect the ones you didn't want, but these are the columns in the spreadsheet that are going to be made available to me for steps later in the integration flow. Okay, step one complete. Let's move back to the requirements and just remind ourselves what the next step is. So the next step is to connect to our Salesforce Developer Edition org. Now, this is mimicking me pushing leads somewhere into our sales team. So we have a Developer Edition org mimicking a Sales Cloud implementation. And what we actually want to do is look for existing lead records, because we all know that creating duplicates is a big no-no. So before pushing records in, I need to be able to look for existing lead records. And it's asking me to match on first name, last name, and email address. So let's do that next. Okay, so navigating back into the Composer flow, we can create the next step in the integration by using the plus icon underneath the trigger event. Now again, I can start including logic or another interaction with the system. Now we want to query a Salesforce org, so we'll choose system action, and there is a connector for Salesforce. Now again, we need to connect and give it the authorization to access our specific org. I'll call it Sales Cloud. I'll connect through to it. Make sure I get the right password. Allow access. So I've now got the ability to complete actions within my Developer Edition org. So you can see I can delete records, I can update records, but because we're querying for duplicates, we'll select the get records operation. And again, Composer is going to query our org to get all of the objects, including custom objects if I had any. I decide what's the object I want to query. I'm looking for duplicate leads, so I'm going to use the lead object. Now, all fields are returned by default, but I could only select the ones I wanted to. If I needed, I'll just leave it as the default for now. And now I just have to decide, how am I going to filter the records it's searching on? Now, in the requirements, they were first name, last name, and email. So query for the field in the Salesforce org, first name equals, and then when I select value, you can see that it includes the rows from the Google Sheet that initiated the flow in the first step. So I can simply select first name matches first name from Google. Repeat the operation for last name equals last name from the Google Sheet. And the final one to match on was email. I can optionally order by. It's not important in this case because I'm just determining whether there are any matching records. So step 2 is now completed. We have a get records action connecting to Salesforce, and we're looking for lead records matching on 3 attributes. So the next step is to add an if-else check to see if there are any matching records. So again, using the plus icon at the bottom, the next step is now some logic that I need to include. So I've queried for records matching. Now there may be records returned or there may not be. So this if-else block is going to allow me to check. So what are the conditions to run the if-else check? Well, if I select fields and scroll to the bottom, you can now see that I've got information available from the Google Sheets that initiated the operation, but now I've got information from step 2, which is the get records action in Salesforce. Now, because it was a get records action, it now has a list of lead available because it was the lead object. And I can simply ask to say whether that is empty. Because if it's empty, then there weren't any matching records. Now, I've created a branch here, and it's reminding me that branches must have at least one step. So instead of clicking the plus at the bottom, I need to click the plus within the branch for the next step. So let's go back to the requirements and just remind ourselves what the next step is. So the last step is saying if the list returned is empty, so no matching leads are found, then create a brand new lead record and set a value for 7 attributes that we captured originally in the Google Sheet, if you remember. So within the branch, click the plus, and again, the interaction is we want to push the lead into our existing Salesforce org, so it's a system action connecting to Salesforce. Now, because I've previously connected to it, I just need to select the connection. We called it Sales Cloud, and the action is create new record. But note that there are others available like updating records or deleting records. What object are you creating? Well, we're creating a brand new lead, and now we can select the fields we want to use in the create record operation. So let's select them. First name, last name. Last name's a required field, so I don't have to select it. Email, industry, lead source, country. And I'll just go back to the requirements to check lead source, country, industry, and phone. I've missed phone. And click apply. So you can see that any required fields designated by the red asterisks here are automatically selected for me, because I'm going to have to specify a value in order to create the record. The others were optionally selected by me. Now, when I tab into each field, you can see that I can create custom expressions if I needed to. So these are synonymous with formula fields, or I can just select the value directly from the Google Sheet. So last name maps to last name, country maps to country, email, first name, industry, lead source, and finally, phone number. So that was the last step in the mini hack. So if we just recap what we did, we created a trigger that looks for a new row event in the Google Sheet, logs into a developer edition org and runs a query matching on first name, last name, and email for each new row. If the list is empty, so it doesn't find a match, then it creates a new record of type lead and specifies these values directly from the spreadsheet. So we're ready to test this integration to see if it works to complete the mini hack. Now, in order to do that, I need to log into the developer edition org I'm using. And let's set up a query because there are existing leads in here. Let's create a brand new list view. And we'll call it leads today. And we'll search for all leads where the created date equals today. Now this will help us test it because right now this list is empty. There haven't been any leads created in this Salesforce org today. Now that's hopefully going to change because once we create a row in the Google Sheet, we should see this magically have a new record in it. Okay, so let's test it out. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is move back to my Composer flow. And one of the things I'm going to do is test it. And the easiest way to do that is using the test button in the top right-hand corner. Now, what this does is it deploys my flow and then will notify me when it's waiting for my trigger action. So at the top here, you can see waiting for the test to start. I find it normally takes about 10 seconds. And then it changes to a waiting trigger event. Now, the trigger event for us is a new row in the marketing lead spreadsheet. So let's move to the marketing lead spreadsheet. Now, I have on my clipboard copied and pasted some attributes that I can just very quickly paste in here with all of the information I need. I've created someone called Sam Smith with all of the information in the columns. If I move back to the Composer flow, what I'm waiting for is I'm waiting for it to initiate the flow, to process it, to save it, and then I'll get the test has finished message. And on the right-hand side, you can see that the test gives me the outputs. It now gives me the sheet ID, the spreadsheet name. If I scroll down, I can now see things like even the lead ID that was created. So if this was successful, and it looks like it has been because I would get a red cross if any of these steps had failed, we can navigate back to the leads today list view filter we'd set up, hit the refresh button, and as if by magic, we've created an automation that now means the Sam Smith test data that we created in our spreadsheet has been inserted into our org. So if we navigate back and just recap, before we had a use case where a marketing team was collecting leads event from a spreadsheet, and after the event they had to manually check their Salesforce org to see if the lead existed, and then manually create it if it hadn't. So what we've done very quickly is created a process that makes the teams way more productive and less error prone. Because now whenever a new record's created in the Google Sheet, It will automatically find a duplicate and only create the record if it doesn't find one. And that concludes today's mini hack solved. In 20 minutes, we've taken a high-level requirement that asked us to connect Google Sheets and Salesforce and used the MuleSoft Composer graphical editor to declaratively, without any programming experience, not only connect two systems together, but also apply some logic. So I'm hoping you can take the mini hack example and see how you might be able to apply it to your business challenges. If you like what you've seen, click the like button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be notified for future videos that appear. Thanks for listening.